Welcome to episode 2 of our series on investing in disaster risk reduction. This episode is part of a 5-step approach to financing disaster risk reduction, which we are implementing across different countries. In the first episode, we focused on step 1, understanding the costs of disasters. We explored how different kinds of disasters create both direct and indirect costs, as well as long-term effects on a country's economy. In today's episode, we'll focus on understanding how much should be spent on disaster risk reduction and how we can track the current level of investments to estimate investment gaps. So why invest in disaster risk reduction? Many disasters can be avoided by taking preventative measures such as improving drainage systems to prevent floods or restoring natural defenses like mangroves to mitigate coastal erosion. These types of investments not only prevent disasters, but also reduce the overall financial burden on a country. Other measures like early warning systems and building more resilient infrastructure can help minimize damage when disasters do strike. That said, while we can significantly reduce the impact of disasters, it's impossible nor affordable to eliminate all costs entirely. However, a substantial portion of the average disaster costs in a country can be avoided through well-planned disaster risk reduction strategies. That's what we want to capture. How much investment is needed to reduce avoidable costs? For example, if a country faces a potential disaster cost of 100 million, it may be possible to avoid 50 million of that cost with proper measures on disaster risk reduction. The key question becomes, how much investment is required to achieve that 50 million in savings? Of course, the answer depends on the effectiveness of disaster risk reduction measures you implement, be it strengthening early warning systems or making new infrastructure more resilient. Several studies have tried to quantify the benefit-cost ratio for disaster risk reduction measures. Overall, they conclude that this ratio could range from 2:1 to 10:1 or higher, indicating that the benefits of such measures often significantly exceed their costs. If we take a ratio of 5:1, this means that a 10 million investment can prevent 50 million in potential damages. The question then becomes, how much are you already investing? In other words, are we investing enough in disaster risk reduction given our risk profile and future estimated costs? This isn't an easy question to answer because tracking the current level of investment can be challenging, especially because disaster risk reduction is a cross-cutting issue. As such, related public expenditures are distributed among several ministries and agencies, such as transport, public works, agriculture, and so on. In addition, investment can come from different sources, including national budgets, private investments, and international assistance. For this episode's purposes, however, we will focus on public spending either through budget allocation or public expenditure.
UNDRR has developed a tool to help governments track how much they are spending on disaster risk reduction by classifying and identifying relevant budget items. This is what we call a budget tagging and tracking system, which enables governments to estimate, monitor, and track expenditures related to DRR. To implement this system, the first thing to do is to define what we mean by investment in disaster risk reduction. This is where a taxonomy comes in handy. A taxonomy is a classification system that clarifies what activities or public spending count as disaster risk reduction. Using this taxonomy as a reference, we can scan through the budget to identify relevant items. As public expenditures might have different degrees of relevance to disaster risk reduction, tagging systems should indicate the level of relevance of a budget line to DRR. In our guidance, we suggest classifying expenditures as 2 principal if the budget line explicitly and directly contributes to disaster risk reduction. It is classified as 1, significant, if the budget line mentions these objectives, but they are not the primary motivation. M, or marginal expenditure, refers to budget lines that make a minor contribution to these objectives. Then there is P for potential expenditure, which applies to items when it is unclear if they contribute to disaster risk reduction, requiring additional information. And finally, none applies to budget items that do not contribute to these objectives at all. Countries can then track expenditures using the tag to quantify and monitor these expenditures. This tracking can be undertaken occasionally, as and when needed to inform new policy, or institutionalized as a standard process in the annual budget and public investment planning cycles and integrated into financial management information systems. Budget tagging and tracking systems have been quite common in the climate space. Our research shows that at least 60 countries have some experience with expenditure reviews for disaster risk reduction and/or climate change adaptation. They offer significant benefits in terms of transparency and accountability, and they inform decision-making. They also help improve budget allocation and mainstream these issues in the work of line ministries. Since there are significant overlaps between disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation, we recommend implementing related tagging systems in an integrated manner, rather than approaching these two topics separately. Now that we have seen how to estimate spending on disaster risk reduction, we can try to compare it with the estimated level of investment required to achieve national goals in this area. Reviewing expenditures from many countries and international partners, our results suggest that current investments in disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation only meet 10 to 25% of those needs in most countries. This leaves a significant gap. Our goal is to help countries address these gaps. In our next episodes, we will thus discuss how to prioritize investments and find ways to mobilize financing for them. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.